I'll do that. John Curtis,
Present.
Marty McPherson,
Here.
Maurice Osborne,
Here.
Charles Bissetta,
Here.
Paul Tischler,
Yes.
Kent Smith,
Here.
Dennis Aronaki, Randall Kirk. We do have a quorum present.
Public comment. No one's signing.
Okay, Brian's saying he still can't hear. Charles, try using this, so you're gonna have to hold it to your mouth. Is it on?
No.
Try the button.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 4, consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion for consent. I have a motion, do I hear a second? Motion made and seconded that we move the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Move on to item number 5, administrative and financials. Kathy?
I can have a mic. Thank you, everyone, and I appreciate the tolerance some time to get the sound system situated. But real quickly, just a little bit on administrative. We've had a change in staffing positions following the retirement or the departure of Stephanie Rexgrove. Annette Kinney was recently named as a permanent assistant and has served as the district assistant or staff assistant beginning in, I believe, February 2019. We've moved her up into that position. It's not the actual position that Stephanie had, but Annette has done, well, she's actually proven herself to be a rock star these last 4 months, stepping up and self-teaching herself the intricacies of her district rules and being just a major resource as we work through some of the permitting responsibilities on our historic use permits. It is my goal, once we get this new building, that we go ahead and move forward with a GIS person as well as replacing the staff assistant before summer's end. You know, we've just been trying to hold this together to get into the new building and minimize as much transition as possible, but, you know, the need is there. With that, would you like me to move on to the next item?
Yeah.
Okay, next item, discuss, consider possible action regarding Texas County District Retirement System Plan Assessment. In your package, you should have, well, to begin with, each year the district receives assessment from TDRS on our plan that more or less tells us how adequate it is and if it's affordable. We received that back in July, by the time COVID hit, and I had a few questions with our representative, and I talked to Paul a little bit on it. And since then, you know, I've gotten some responses back. But as many of you know, with your own investments, due to the corona outbreak, investment markets have declined significantly in 2020, and this is likely to be something we experience in our plan as well. But hopefully, you know, these, as with any decline and increases, it spreads smoothly over a 5-year period, so it's not a major change. But with that said, even looking at the district's 2021 assessment, knowing that we have always provided a greater contribution amount to minimize these changes, we still do see that there is a slight proposed increase for 2021 from a point, I believe they're referring to it as a 0.10% increase to a 0.73% increase. So if you look at page 4 of that assessment plan, they're more or less contributing this solely to demographics and other changes. And when I kind of inquired to chase that down to see exactly what it was, or, you know, what brings that about, it's largely due to the shift in number of employees the district has, along with employees near, approaching retirement age, increased salaries, and change in even male to female ratios. So, you know, they have some formula that they look at. With that said, you know, one of the other things you have to look at there are other changes. If the board proposed to change the employee contribution rate itself, that would therefore incur potential increases to our rate. And that's not what we're recommending here, but, you know, a lot of things go into making up this rate plan the way they devise it. But unless y'all have some questions, hopefully this information is fairly understandable and explains itself. It would be my recommendation that effective with the January 1st, 2021, that we approve this rate increase of 9.47 for the district's participation in the program. Any questions?
Second.
And for the record, for audio, we have a motion for Maurice Osborne and a second from Kent Smith. Any opposed? Maybe that's the easier way to say it. Raise your hand for the video or catch it. With that said, I'll pass this back to Charles. Or do you want me to do this next? Okay, we'll just move on to the next item. In your package, you have a tab for Chaparral Steel, and I do believe we have a representative on the phone from Chaparral Steel. I see Chris Smith. I'm going to go ahead and lay this out, and if Chris, if you'd like to have comments, you're more than welcome to reach out to you. But the district received a phone call and then followed by communication from Chaparral Steel. They are requesting by letter, which is attached in your packet, to extend their verification period, or actually not extend it, they're requesting a new verification period. And this is actually contemplated in our rules. If you look at under rule point 3.8, K1, the board can determine another 2-year time period other than the original January 1, 2000 to December 31st, 2020. And based on circumstances involved in a particular permit application. The definition of the verification period under the rules also says, or as such period of time is established by the board under rule point 3.8K. So as long as the applicant has met all the timelines imposed in the rules, as far as submitting their application, other required documents, it should be a simple, you know, granting of that new verification period. And with that, I would ask, you know, Chris or Brian Sledge, do you have comments on this? And Sinclair, if you can unmute both of them.
Thanks, Kathy. This is Chris Smith. Yeah, I think you laid it out pretty well. Essentially, there have been some delays primarily related to getting a permanent utility line and utility meter out to the well site. And there's bottom line is that the original permanent pump that was put in the well, it burned up primarily because we were using a temporary generator. So we're still working with Encore to get the meter set, which we expect will be done, I think, in the relative next couple months. And the new pump, the new permanent pump will be installed, we think, by August. But the company would like to have the full 2 years of production taken into account. And so that's why we feel that resetting the verification period to start on January of next year would provide the district with better data. So it would still be a 2-year period. It would just start 1 year later. And I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Brian, do you have anything to add?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. No, I think it's a recommendation and a request that are consistent with our rules. We want a verification period that includes actual 2 years of pumping, and this well's still not up and running and ready to go. And I think it'd be much more beneficial for the district and its permitting purposes to have granted this and have 2 full years of metered data. It's clearly authorized by the rules. That's exactly why we put the provision in the rules.
And so I've included a motion in your packet on that bottom of that page if someone would like to.
Okay, so Encore is saying that they'll have a meter again August of this year. It is this year, correct? I'm telling you. Sir?
That is correct, yes.
Good luck. It might be August of next year, way on for Ellis County. What's this not August of this year? Do you have a provision for that? It could, I'm not being silly, it could be November.
So what I'm hearing is, could the applicant request a second verification period?
Can we make the motion contingent upon the date of the verification period start from the date that line is installed?
So I think that is a good point. The rules more or less allow for a year to year. So Brian, you want to respond to that?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. Is the request to start the 2-year period after sometime this fall?
No, I think what I was hearing is contingent on the Encore getting power there, which may not be as soon as Chaparral hopes. Maybe extend it to
You cannot trust the word that's said.
you know, there's concern. And so if we approve this contingent on it, it might be like, are you saying February 2021?
It could be, there's no telling. Can we make the verification period start when that meter is set?
Okay.
When they could actually pump water.
When they can actually pump water?
Yes.
Okay, his question is, can we make it where it follows when the well is actually producing water? Now, I don't have my rule book in front of me. I think there is a following provision that specifies the first of the year. Is that correct?
There is 3.8 K10 contemplates that it would start at the first of the calendar year. The board could do something different. It would probably be cleaner for our rules just for tracking usage to have calendar years. That's what we track usage on. But we can do anything the board wants to do.
Well, that would be the buffer then, if we did January 1, that would be the buffer for it not being done in August.
Correct. So he's saying it'd probably be beneficial to go ahead with the January to allow that additional buffer to have it produced and produced to the level properly needed. Any other questions from the board?
I'll make that motion, that the verification period starts. Okay. Yeah, I will make the motion, to approve this verification period to begin on January 1st, 2021.
Did we add the well ID?
For well ID number 1821.
It'll be good for 1 year.
2 year verification.
Right.
For your verification.
Oh, is that on?
Yeah, good point.
I'll second it.
We have a second from Marty McPherson. Anyone not in favor of this motion? Signal by raising your hand. Motion carries. Thank you, Chris, for being here today.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll move on to item number 7. Sinclair on the public outreach.
Okay, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. So things are kind of getting back to normal a little bit. Last week, I was able to have the first in-person presentation since all this COVID-19 pandemic began. So I'm excited as things start to move back to normal and we're starting to have socially distanced meetings and presentations. I presented to the Grandview Lions Club last Tuesday and it went very well. They have a large annual event each year and they want to bring me back out with the trailer to come to that event later on in the year, assuming that they can host it. Kathy and I also presented on Thursday to the Johnson County Association of Realtors at their luncheon. This was the first luncheon that they've been able to have since February. So everyone was really excited to be able to come together and have this presentation. It went really well. There were 32 realtors there that represent Johnson County. So we talked about information regarding well ownership, the importance of transferring and registering wells. We talked about House Bill 1221, which is on a seller's disclosure, there's the item about identifying if you are in a groundwater conservation district. So we talked about the history of that, why it's important to know if you're in a groundwater district, and being that local district, we talked about who we are, what we do, just kind of the importance of knowing that information and who we are. So it went really well. It was a great event. Other public relations and education initiatives, I released a press release about rainwater harvesting on May 19th. It was published in the Glen Rose Reporter and the Hillsborough Reporter. We did have one resident of Hill County contact the office. She called up here and said that after reading that article, she wants to install rainwater harvesting components to her home. So she's going to keep us updated and send us pictures as she does that. But that's definitely one of my goals with this type of outreach, is to have some kind of change and implementation. So I'm glad that that resident reached out to us and said that she read that information and she's excited to implement rainwater harvesting in her home. I've got a lot of virtual meetings that have been going on. I was on the Texas Alliance of Groundwater Districts. I'm on their education and information committee. We had a virtual meeting on May 15th. We're working on a communications handbook for GCDs across the state. I was also on a Blue Bonnet RC&D virtual meeting. There's a couple conservation projects going on in Johnson and Hill County, so I joined that meeting as well. This Wednesday, I will be on the TWCA Membership and Services Committee meeting. And then next week, I'm presenting to the Midlothian Rotary Club. And then in July, as of right now, we have a event scheduled for the water education trailer. That one is still kind of up in the air, but I'm hopeful that things are starting to move a little bit more to normal, so we can start to have some more outreach events. And as always, our social media did well. I've included those numbers in your board packet in my report. So if there are any questions, I would love to answer them. Otherwise, that's all I have to report today.
Thank you, Sinclair.
Thank you.
We're on item number 8, groundwater management update. James,
Can y'all hear me okay? Morning, Jay. Good morning. Okay, you guys saw the summary of the latest Run 11 at the last meeting, and I can't remember who all was there. I think there may be a face or two in the group this morning that didn't see that, so I'm going to run through it real quickly as a summary, and then just a reminder of where we're heading for GMA 8 from the bigger picture. Let me see. Kathy, can I share a screen?
Yes.
All right, I'll see if I can do that.
Is it letting me?
Yeah, hold on just a sec. Host disabled, participant screen sharing.
Okay, she's trying to get you there.
All right. Brian, I like it when your background makes your head disappear momentarily. That's kind of fun to watch. It's kind of like you're decapitated there. All right, let me try again. Host disabled, participant screen sharing.
Sinclair, your volume's off.
I'm trying to find where I can allow you to share.
While you're doing that, I'll update the board a little bit. The changes that we made to the run 11, which is sort of the new updated DFC run for GMA 8, we've talked about in several different meetings. And so this is really just a real brief update this morning, but those changes occurred in Upper Trinity. I'll show you the map in a little bit if I can share a screen, but Upper Trinity's to, the north and west of you, so that's going to have a little impact on y'all. You made changes to the vertical distribution of pumping in the Austin and Hensel, and then there were changes to the southern Trinity district just to the south. Those actually are very minor changes, and it was just changes for the pumping between 2010 and 2020, so it won't make much difference for you guys in Prairie Lands.
Okay, Jay,
And
you can,
try
sorry,
again?
you can try.
All right. Bam, there we go. How's that looking?
It's there.
Looks good. We can see it.
Okay. Can y'all see the map now?
Gotcha.
Okay. So Upper Trinity, there's your map there of where those changes occurred. Excuse me. If you recall, they increased their pumping about, I think it was about 10 or 11,000 acre feet just to adjust to what their latest metering and estimates for pumping had indicated. And so you can see that in those southern counties there, they're going to have some impact on y'all. McLennan County, just to the south of y'all, made some changes that are fairly minor from 2010 to 2020. And then Bell County, Clearwater Underground Water Conservation District made changes for slight changes for their county. And then the Williamson and Travis County that don't have groundwater conservation districts, they made some changes there. And then obviously you guys had made changes to the vertical distribution. So just as a reminder, we wanted to compare the results for 2070. That was when the last round of planning we did ran out to 2070. And that's when that model run ended, run 10. And so we wanted to make an apples to apples comparison for 2070. And so we did that. But this run will go all the way out to 2080. But for comparison purposes, we're going with 2070. The blue negative values indicate higher water levels. The red positive values indicate greater drawdowns in 2070. So if we look at those results again, you saw these last month, but just as a refresher, you can see that, for Twin Mountain, Travis Peak, in Ellis County, you're seeing 50, 60 foot more drawdown. In Hill County, pretty similar. And then in Johnson County there, generally the Austin, about 80 feet. And then you see, because we're moving that production or pumping out of the Hensel into the Austin, generally you're seeing a little bit of a less water level decline there in the blue. And then if we go to Somerville County, similar type result. And so what we're seeing here in these numbers is the increase in water level decline, the number of feet of difference between the 2010 and 2070 drawdown. So in other words, between 2010 and 2070 in Ellis County in the Houston, we're seeing an additional 63 feet. Again, this is a culmination, or I guess an amalgamation of all of the changes that were made in the modeling, and the shift in the pumping vertically in prairie lands, plus all the other changes in the model. And so overall, not huge changes. And so this is just a refresher, a repeat of what you saw last month. And so when we go out to 2080 and we look at the total drawdowns, just as a reminder, these are the numbers you're seeing as far as total drawdown predicted. For instance, in Ellis, in the Houston, you're going to see 390 acre feet, and 390 foot of drawdown in Ellis County in the Houston. And then you can step through. So the point of this is, as you talk to some of you guys are newer on the board, and trying to find the balance between making groundwater available and limiting impact on existing wells and water level declines long term. The district, along with all the other districts in GMA 8, are trying to balance that equation and those complex issues. And so you can see here that there has been a recognition that according to the best available science we have in the model, that there's going to be significant drawdown in all these aquifers over time, even with the DFCs that we've planned for. And so the grand message on DFCs is that the district, along with other districts, have looked to the future and said, we're trying to balance what is a continued drawdown over time and lowering of pumps and potentially redrilling wells later in the planning period, with conservation and all of the other things that you guys do. And so that is sort of the grand story there. And you can tell by the size of these numbers that you've got, over a 70-year planning horizon for this round of DFCs. You've got, several hundred feet of drawdown that's predicted. So that's sort of the balance that we've come to. And there's Somerville numbers. And then, so the path forward briefly, next meeting is planned for August 7th. I think there may be some, Kathy, I don't know if you've heard any updates on that from Drew. I think that was the plan originally. I don't know if that's been updated.
It's still the 7th.
Okay. So at that meeting, there'll be discussions and possible actions on these results that you're looking at here, and also for potentially other non-relevant aquifers, just to make that official. We don't expect any changes from the last round of planning. There may be districts that come forward with minor changes to their production. We hadn't heard of any yet. And we need to include some appropriate statements regarding the differences between what we're simulating here and what the Water Development Board might simulate. Just kind of round off error decimal places, things like that, and also in how we calculate averages. There's multiple things that go into that. So we want some statements in our DFC statement that say, hey, this is planning and this is modeling, and there's going to be a reason to allow a few percent difference on results in our estimates. So today, basically, I don't know if there needs to be any action items or anything, but what we're asking, as always, is just that an acknowledgement that your representative may need to make some decisions and minor changes to the proposed DFC and other statements at the next GMA 8 meeting. So Charles or Kathy, whoever will be attending that meeting, that's what they'll be needing to do on August 7th or whenever the date is. And that is all I have for today. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, you on item number 9, report.
Okay. Thank you for that report, James. Hopefully we'll be visiting before the GMA meeting to see if we can identify what any of those subtle changes might be. So we're a little prepared for that meeting. Moving on to the general manager's report. Briefly, our historic use permit application progress is, we're still working on that. That's been a very tedious endeavor. Multiple staff members are going through these again. We're finding that some of the information has been received, but we're having to reach back out to these permit applications and get historical information that's older than what the district has on record and clarifying some of the other data that they provided. You know, where there's a situation that some of these systems provide both surface water and groundwater, we're seeing that some of their system numbers they presented may be combined, because once you start looking at the data, it's not clean. So we're, in some cases it is actually, but because it's just not real clear, we're identifying that, cleaning it up, getting it in an order that when we do these final technical reviews, whoever is going through it can look to the same place in each file and find this information. Another situation, unfortunately, that hit some of our smaller cities is they were hit by the ransom virus and some of their computer systems went down and they lost a lot of data. And so some of the only data they have is what Prairie Lands has. And so we've been working with their public works to rebuild their information and try to sort through it, especially where it's not what we call real clean looking, and try to identify what's surface water, what's groundwater. So it's a process and a big learning curve for some, including the entities we're working with. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's all doable, and we're just going to take a little bit longer getting there. If you have questions on that, be glad to scrape off a desk and sit down and talk to you about it, because it takes a while to go through it to see everything. As far as status on our new facility, modern construction reports that they're about 98% complete on the construction. Only items lacking are the base trim, fencing, building signage, and the masonry for the mailbox. They are expecting the base trim to be delivered by the end of the week and installed next week. The cast stone cap for the mailbox has been ordered, and they've had their actual first certificate of occupancy inspection with the city, and there's still a couple of items that need to be addressed before the city will sign off on that. Once that's done, they'll reschedule for a re-inspection. Part of that came to light was the fire alarm panel that is installed will have to be monitored, and I guess I certainly wasn't aware of that process. So now we're reaching out to try to get an alarm company that will monitor that, and that has to be set up and be utilized before they can sign off on it. CO. Something that we heard last week is that our architect, met with Modern and the landscape architect to do a landscape punch list. I haven't been overly pleased with the landscape, how it completed out. First of all, it was very dirty construction. A lot of construction debris seemed to be pushed in before they brought in the topsoil. And that was one of the things I stressed, and I think Paul was even with me at that meeting about having clean topsoil so that whatever demonstrations we could do out there with growing native top planting, they had a chance to survive and live and so forth. Well, all through this, I kept saying I cleaned up. So once McGee and them went out there to do this, I took the yardstick, and sure enough, the fill dirt is not adequate. for the base. And to kind of say a long story, make it short, I provided a copy of McGee's report to each of y'all requiring them to address some of these deficiencies. In the meantime, they've also come back because some of the grants just now have already established itself. You know, would I look at maybe not requiring all of it to be pulled up and just a portion focused on the areas where we're planning to do demonstrations? So I have requested to see if we can get credit on these areas that they have not completed properly, and we'll be meeting with the contractor this afternoon to walk it and describe where I would insist that they go back and redo the beds and the planters in certain areas. And of course, it's all depending on what kind of credit we get back, because this is a pretty serious deficiency as far as, you know, they were told several times during the process, and it's just really looks bad. And it seemed like the landscape architect was even disappointed when he was out there viewing it. I don't know if his crew just didn't follow directions or what. We'll get it all fixed. So other items outside of the actual construction that, you know, we need to have completed before we move in is I have a meeting this week with NetGenius to finalize decisions on our phone telecommunication package. We were able to get AT&T to move up or bump up our fiber installation. It was originally scheduled for July. They're actually going to be on site today to complete the fiber installation. But we're also still a building without furniture. Sinclair and I have met with Business Interiors trying to work out staff offices and boardroom design. I was hoping to receive drawings back at the end of the week last week so that they could finalize budget numbers to look at. Last response I received from our representative was that the manufacturer is in Michigan and they are only working 8 hours a week still, with 4 of those hours at a time on a staggered schedule. So it's taken forever. But in the meantime, I am also chasing down other leads and suggestions. One director told me of a place in Fort Worth. I went there. We're probably certainly going to buy our chairs from there compared to what I've seen. I was just shocked the difference in nice chairs. So we're going to get it pulled together, and you know, the goal is we'll be in hopefully by the end of July, and that's depending on furniture, but we can always get folding tables and chairs and make do. But you know, the COVID has hit us pretty hard on that end, trying to get that type of furniture. And I probably should have been more proactive on my part, but we need budget numbers before we started making those plans. Also in the general manager's report are several other items. Year to date for 2020 on water usage gallons, it looks like we're up to almost 2 billion on production. This is pretty well in line with previous years. Well drilling is continuing on. 18 new wells were drilled in the 4 counties this past month, with the majority of it still being in Johnson County. We're seeing a lot of domestic use continuing on. Several other things that we focused on in the district. We've had a couple public records requests wanting information on, you know, different areas. That's pretty normal. They weren't real aggressive types, so nothing that I get, you know, a little concerned that might need additional review before we send out. We are also working with both Bryan and James Beach on some areas where they're wanting to put additional wells on one property that looks like we need to make sure the spacing from well to well within the property is proper. And it does seem to be a little contentious with the property owner at this point, but I did talk to the driller on Friday and explained a few things to him, and hopefully there's some better understanding that he can take that to that landowner, and we may have cleared up some of that. If not, we may be having attorneys talk to attorneys on that. Let me see, what else? I think that may be it. Any questions on our enforcement? We're still continuing to work with some of the our well owners on cleaning up some past due payments, you know, work out a situation where they need to get it all resolved before a certain date. We have another situation where we found a well owner that was producing water for what was registered as exempt use. We have determined that it's not, and it's actually providing to probably 8 to 12 residents. And so we're now have sent them notice of violation for failure to register the well properly and failure to report and pay water use fees. I don't believe their deadline to respond has come yet, so I do think this is probably going to turn into a little bit more of a just getting it resolved easily, but at this point, this is where we're at on it. If anyone has questions, I'll be glad to visit with them after the meeting on that. But other than that, I don't believe I had anything else to report, but always glad to answer questions if anyone should have any. Yes, John.
Once we complete the punch list of the new building, what's your anticipated time of moving?
So the question was, once all punch lists, responsibilities are completed, what is the timeline to move in? We're given the punch list. We cannot move in until we have the certificate of occupancy. So that has caused where we can't even store furniture there if I even bought furniture. Can't move in anything but the appliances. So hopefully we can start, once we get the certificate of occupancy, they can turn it over to us and we can start moving in a few things with the whole goal of maybe have the office up and running by the end of July. We're going to probably take it a little slower than a normal move, allow the furniture set up, get the IT in there to get everything set up, and that way it's not, you know, your typical flatbed trailer. Yes, sir. Any other questions?
Thank you very much. We move on to item number 10, general counsel's report. Ryan?
Muted. There we go. Can you hear me? Okay, good morning. Few items to report here. The governor on Friday extended his disaster declaration for another 30 days, as he has since April the 12th. The significance of that for us is that the suspension of all the Open Meetings Act provisions that allow online board meetings and things like that are contingent upon him continuing to seek that disaster declaration, which by all accounts he will continue to do because they have to have that to get federal funds. Everything's been kind of starting to return to normal until this week, and we've had another big outbreak, at least in Central Texas, and everybody's retreating again. But we'll see how all that goes. Last month, there was a question about the LCRA applications in the Lost Pine Groundwater District, and I just wanted to provide a little brief on what that is. LCRA, of course, which is the biggest surface water provider in the Central Texas area in the Colorado River Basin, had acquired in 2015 about 4,800 acres, an old Boy Scout ranch, and filed an application in February last year with the Lost Pines District for 25,000 acre feet of water. The Groundwater District Board had a number of protests to that application, and eventually in September of 2018 sent that off to the State Office of Administrative Hearings to serve as the hearings examiner for the Board of Directors, an option that's clearly available to prairie lands when you get a contested permit application. And so for the last year and a half, they've been holding the hearing at the State Office of Administrative Hearings. And what came out that was discussed or referenced at last month's board meeting was the proposal for decision by the administrative law judge. And again, we've talked about that before. When you send something off to SOA, what they do is hold a hearing, admit all the evidence, and then the administrative law judge puts together a proposal for decision for the board of directors. You know, it goes back to the Groundwater District Board of Directors, which has proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law for the permit. And bottom line, the administrative law judge did recommend permit issuance. He interestingly recommended that LCRA have to install monitoring wells on the property that monitor both groundwater declines and loss of surface water in the basin from springs and such before they can start their well field. And their proposal was to phase it in over time. They ramp up over 3 phases to 25,000 acre feet per year. But part of what they had proposed was to pump groundwater out and discharge into a stream that feeds into the Colorado River so that they can distribute that water around to customers in their basin, and to help firm up their surface water supplies as part of a conjunctive use project between groundwater and surface water. Some of the parties had claimed that they could not discharge water into the creek because that would constitute waste. The administrative law judge did not agree that that was waste and recommended that be issued. Right now, what's happened is all the parties have filed exceptions. They have an opportunity to file exceptions to the administrative law judge's proposal and to file replies to the other parties' exceptions. And that happened in the first week of June. Now the administrative law judge will decide whether they want to revise their proposal for decision before sending it back to the Lost Pines Groundwater District Board of Directors to make its ultimate decision. It is not bound by the administrative law judge's proposal, but it has to find that he made an error of law or an error of fact to change any of the findings of fact and conclusions of law and recommend something different. So we'll keep an eye on that as it goes forward. Not a lot's been happening on the legislative front. Legislative committees, by and large, have not been meeting during the pandemic. Something that I picked up on talking to the House parliamentarian a couple of months ago was that the House and Senate rules do not allow legislative committees to meet remotely through Zoom meetings or anything like that. And the governor's executive orders have no bearing on the legislative branch. So they have to meet in person if they're going to meet. And the Capitol's been shut down. The speaker and the lieutenant governor have been encouraging them to not meet, save and except the appropriations and Senate finance committees, because the state coffers are revenue projections are a mess because of COVID and because of the big problem with oil prices. And so they are encouraging appropriations and finance to meet. Appropriations, the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the speaker of the House have asked all state agencies to reduce their budgets by 5% across the board. And so folks are trying to, Water Development Board, TCEQ, all the agencies we pay attention to, we're trying to figure out how to accomplish that. But I think you will see in-person meetings of those bodies. You just won't see any Zoom type meetings, and so they're kind of completely at the whim of COVID and the outbreaks and the surges and all of that. Our legislative groups on substantive groundwater legislation, which are primarily TWCA and the Texas Alliance of Groundwater Districts, have started their work in the last month or two, starting to talk about ideas and potential legislation for next session. And Kathy and I are on top of that, so we will keep you apprised as things develop. I don't think we had any UIC applications in the district in the last month. And that's my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your follow-up on the earlier question.
You bet.
Not, thanks very much, Brian. Move on to item number 11. Open forum, and business for future meetings, and you have anything to make it on the agenda? I'll make a motion to adjourn. A motion made by Marty and second by Kent. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carried. Now it's 10 o'clock.
We stop the recording.